Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Dojo Live. One day before Thanksgiving, we are streaming live on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and on YouTube and Twitch. So, welcome to the show. And I'd like to have Marielle introduce our guest today. We have all of North America present on this show today, by the way. 3 different countries: Canada, US, and Mexico. So, very excited to have this chat. Marielle?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today on Dojo Live. This is Wednesday, 27th of November, 2019. We are creating the future for workplace diversity by sharing and learning from the stories and experiences of tech luminaries. My name is Maria Navarro. I'm broadcasting live from our Chihuahua offices. With me today is a co-creator and co-producer of Dojo Live, Tudu Siragusa, and my fellow teammate and co-host Carlos Ponce in our Mexico City offices. Also, we have our co-host in training, Laura Fimbres. Hi, guys. Today we're going to be talking about the reimagining mobility and accessibility across regions, or how tech can power better travel. Here to share his story today, we have Tal Shalitz, CEO of Betteres. This is a reservation and ticketing platform built to transform bus and coach travel. Welcome to Dojo Live, Tal. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, to get your story started today, could you please share a bit about yourself as well as Betteres?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Tal Shalit. As you mentioned, I started Betteres at the end of 2011 after being involved with reservation systems, enterprise systems, and technology for quite a few years before. My background right before starting Betteres was at one of Canada's airlines, Porter Airlines, where I was overseeing the IT department there. And that's when the pain of reservation systems really started for me. Yeah. In terms of Betteres, I think, there's maybe a quick story. When I was in 2012 imagining reservation systems, I was in California to visit my in-laws. Not only did I have to visit the in-laws, I actually had to get to them by bus from San Francisco airport. So I got online, tried about 20 steps through the booking flow. Maybe 2 children later, I got to the end when they told me they'll mail me the tickets. And this was in 2012, not 1984. So that's when something clicked that there might be an opportunity there. And having been in IT for a while, it was really an easy decision to investigate this industry, and it seemed like it was ripe for disruption. And that's when we got into the concept of Betteres in the ground travel space.
Thank you. That's cool. Just to state again, our topic for today is reimagining mobility and accessibility across regions. Can you tell us, why did you choose this topic?
Yeah, it's a big topic, and really it's been discussed globally by many companies, by many governments, and the question is, how do you connect urban centers with remote locations? And in general, the cost of dealing with the remote locations and the unique things that are tied to it could be a lot more complicated, a lot more costly. So it's something that has really escaped a lot of us, but it is something that's near and dear to our hearts. How do we start reimagining mobility really as a service for all those locations? And that's really what we wanted to talk about here.
Thank you. Well, in this business, I've heard, really in this time of our history, everything is going online, going internet, and I've heard this concept a lot, connected experience. Can you tell us, for you, related to your company, what does this mean?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So, Betteres is an enterprise system, and what does that mean? We fuel and enable the back-end systems, the core systems for operators, specifically for us, mostly bus companies. So we help them, upload their inventory, deal with their pricing. We help them maximize revenue with things like dynamic pricing, multiple products, multiple distribution channels. We help them with scanning capabilities, give them an open platform that can be extended into an ecosystem. So that's what we do with Betteres. We're the system of record, and we try to really allow I call this the last frontier of travel. Ground travel, and even more so bus travel, is kind of the most left behind part of travel, and it is necessary in the connected formula. So as you think about travel, you don't just say, okay, I need a flight today. Usually you have to get to an end destination from the airport, and that might be by train, it might be by train and then bus, maybe there's an Uber or a Lyft that you take after. You might even take a bicycle share at the end of your trip to get to your end destination. So the question is, how do you map all of those things together, and how do you think about the building blocks like pricing, scheduling, and time schedules across all of those different modes of transit, and how do you present that to the consumer in a way that they can just use as a service? And that's really what we're talking about here. So we fuel this last components of ground travel, probably one of the more complicated ones when it comes to scheduling and pricing, given the number of permutations. But the discussion here is about how do we tie in with other types of systems, other types of verticals to provide a seamless experience for the end passenger.
So Tal, you said something earlier about you saw an opportunity for disruption.
Yeah.
Can you paint the picture of what is it like today for a travel? What is it that you're actually solving? What's the experience like today?
Yeah, so we are a B2B company. We do have components of our software that are B2B2C, meaning they can use our platform to create microsites and offer their inventory or services back to the public or the consumer. So I mentioned we help them deal with schedules and pricing, all the different fares, all the different structures and products that they put in place. That is the core component, but then it's about selling it. So how do you sell it? Well, we're all familiar with web as the main selling channel, although when you start looking globally, web is still very much behind. So the other channels that you see a lot of distribution through, ticket counters, in essence, Betterez is a point of sale system that is used by bus operators. So you have the ticket counter as one, and then you have agencies, and those could be big travel agencies that might want to resell your product and combine it with other offers, or it could be a gas station at the side of the road. Recently, when we launched in Mexico and in the US, we now have OXXO and 7-Elevens connected to our platform and selling some bus tickets for some of our operators. So it really is about distribution, getting your product out, but obviously the first step is to set it up properly in a way that allows you to scale, grow, and report on everything. So we provide all those components, and we allow you to tie into different systems as part of that service.
Okay, so let's see if I can paint the picture here.
Sure.
I book a ticket now, wherever I use, Travelocity, Expedia, doesn't matter, right? I book a ticket, I travel somewhere. I pretty much can manage everything I need there, including a rental car. However, if I don't want to rent a car and I want to travel using a bus or a train or what have you, I'm pretty much on my own to do that today, correct? There's no solution that gives me the last mile option, whether I want to use a scooter, for example, et cetera. So what you're providing is that operator, be it an OTA or a ticketing agency, the ability to tie in more than just the traditional travel we're all used to. It's the last mile. Am I getting this right? Is that
you're getting closer? I think the reality is the travel space is so fragmented. It's extremely fragmented. There are lots of components, lots of systems. If you look at the fact that this industry has had to catch up and is decades behind from a technology perspective, many of the big companies were forced to create their own system. They didn't have an enterprise system. They built it from scratch, and the big ones had a budget to do it. So by doing it themselves, it created even more fragmentation because you couldn't easily tie in. Expedia couldn't go to one provider and say, okay, give me your inventory, and now I'm connected to everyone. It had to start creating direct links with everyone. So you do see aggregators in the space. Betterez is not an aggregator, although we fuel aggregators with our open platform. So you see more aggregators in the space, but because everything is so fragmented and fragmented globally, it becomes more of a challenge, and it's still, I'd say we got a ways to go. You do see some examples globally of things that are working well, but because it's so fragmented, it's still not there. But the goal you mentioned, last mile, that is one of the goals that people are trying to get to. It's just that word has been used, or that phrase has been used for many years, probably over a decade now, and we're seeing examples of it working well, but depending on the geography and the type of operators in place, we're still not quite there. There's still a lot of work to be done.
So one of the things you mentioned is, different countries have different ways of dealing with travel and managing that. I mean, there's different realities, right?
Yeah.
I think often in the U.S. or in North America, we tend to have a bit of a myopic view of what that looks like.
Yeah.
How does this benefit consumers, for example, where there's limited options beyond getting to the airport once they land there, for example, right? Have you kept that in mind? How you go about targeting the regions that you could provide this service to? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, again, everything starts with dense population areas. So, once those areas are addressed, then people start looking at the fringes and trying to connect more and more remote areas. But as you go more remote from the urban centers, the costs start to balloon. You don't have the same population density. You don't have the same volume, which means you probably don't have the same amount of money coming in, and the solutions are more fragmented, which means you need to spend more. And that's where the challenge becomes a reality. And when we talk about mobility and accessibility, you start talking about the role of government and what role the government has to take in enabling accessibility to different places. We are seeing a lot of innovation. If you look at mobility as a service emerging in regions like Helsinki, there's a lot to learn from what they're doing there. I'd say that's a contained experiment given the geography and the advanced nature of many of the services that they have there, but it's a great use case. We are obviously seeing ride sharing across the globe and how those services are taking off. We're now talking about autonomous vehicles and what's that going to replace, and again, how is that going to tie into the travel formula, and then continue to connect the different types of travel verticals is what's there. So the role of government, how do we approach the fringes, the last 20% of the populations, is still a tough one because funding it is not that easy. Most companies that start, it's a lot easier to make money if you're in the core and focusing on where the people are. Once you start going outside, it becomes a slightly different story.
But do you think that's a missed opportunity for companies that are only focusing for the core cities? I mean, I've often heard of companies that they have an A-city strategy, right? But A-city is also very crowded, a lot of competition, a lot of Me Too's end up kind of happening, right? So I've seen a lot of successful businesses focusing on B cities, OC cities, the less populated marketplaces, and they look at those as opportunities. Is what you're putting out also potentially a way to tap into those opportunities for companies that would license your technology?
Yeah, so B cities, C cities, and you keep kind of going down that list. I think part of the challenge is the long sales cycles and the long decision cycles that some of those companies have to take. So it's not something that happens rapidly, but as those solutions start again into the rest of the cities out there, then yes, it will become easier. I think one of the main things that everyone has to continuously think about is openness of your data, ability to share the data, and just willingness to share the data. I think we do see examples of some larger companies that are trying to create a monopoly, hold the data, force other operators to only list their data internally with them, trying to become gatekeepers. While those might give them a competitive advantage in the short term, it does become a hindrance to connecting people, and most of those companies have not been successful trying to create that the monopoly type view. Some have, and that's part of the challenge. But some, even the ones that have, are looking now at how to improve it and how to ensure more openness and more partnerships, more standards as we go out there.
Putting the business, and I'm just going to ask one more question, and I'm going to let my co-host with a few more. Putting the business aspect aside, the opportunity aspect aside, let's talk about the people, right? I mean, there's some people who are kind of left out.
Yeah.
How does this help create more trust in those organizations that you mentioned, that often those individuals question their intention, which is very business oriented, and feel somehow left out, like they're second-class citizens, for example? How can this help reduce that kind of mindset or that sense of disconnection for those individuals?
Yeah, very good question. Some examples, maybe a couple of metrics that I found surprising once I got into bus travel. The size of the industry is absolutely massive. The global bus market, over $75 billion. Maybe surprising to some, not surprising to others, but in many countries, over 95% of that business is actually run via offline sales in cash. Those are real challenges as you try to get out of something that is decades out of date. But even though it's decades out of date, buses are still one of the most used forms of transportation globally, and one of the only accessible options for people across the world. So, for a software company like us to try to sell that globally, a big part of it is establishing trust, being able to relate to the businesses, but also being able to relate to the regions, understanding the nuances of each region, what works well, what doesn't. We think about things like payments in different regions, passenger experiences, government regulations. Those are all things that you have to relate to as you get into different regions, and that is about building trust. And the only way to build trust, especially remotely as a software company, is openness and being clear about what you do, being clear about what you don't do, and given the ability for people to really hold what you're offering, try it out, and see that it works well for them.
I think Laura has a question.
Go ahead, Laura.
Yes, so on Beren's webpage, I saw that you have received recognition of other industries like Paris trains, casino, and airport shuttles. My question is, what kind of services do you offer them or you provide them? Is it just the booking ticket part, or how else do you guys connect?
Yeah, and again, as a startup, sometimes you go where some of the interest is, and that's usually how you end up in some verticals that may not be, exactly your core. But all of those verticals that you mentioned in ground travel. They all have a similar requirement, which is a need to set up your inventory and need to understand your scheduling, your timetables, the connections between different schedules, and then be able to price it. And then on the operational side, it's about selling it across different channels and being able to redeem, view ridership, and understand what's actually happening and drive your business intelligence and metrics from what the system is doing. So for us, it really is the same methodology, the same platform. It just we've seen different companies use us for things we didn't really imagine when we initially created Betterez, but it's the same platform, same concepts across the board.
Marielle, do you have a question?
Yeah, actually, I was just thinking about in today's changing world, we have a lot of means of transportation. For example, airplanes. Like 10 years ago, well, right now they're cheaper than they were 10 years ago. Another example that I can think of is it's Uber. Like suddenly when Uber started like popping in all of the cities, that definitely changed the game in transporting around cities. Talking about this ground travel landscape today, what does it look like to you, like from your perspective? Do you think this is going to have a huge change, and that's why you're betting on it with Betterez?
Yeah, short answer is absolutely. Absolutely seeing an opportunity here. We talk about we call them phono sapiens. It's not a term we invented, but it's a person that checks their phone every 10 minutes. That's the new reality, and that's very relevant to travel because it's really causing people to rethink how they operate. Those customers are demanding speed and convenience. It really is about the connected experience, trying to improve mobility options across different regions, across the entire world. You do have to think about underserved populations. We talk about remote communities. We've talked about people that don't have cell phones. How do you support them? People that don't have access to the internet. How do you support them? People that don't have bank accounts, the unbanked, if you'd like. If they don't have credit cards, well, how do you support them? So there's a lot, and that comes back to accessibility. But really, at the end of the day, we are talking about providing the traveler with the right mode of transportation, at the right time, at the right place, at the right price. So everything's kind of getting redrawn right now. You talked about Uber. Well, that came in and really woke up just about any operator in travel, regardless. Even airlines woke up when they saw Uber and saw that there are different modes of operations that can drastically change things. So everyone's kind of woken up. Airlines are starting to figure out what their role is. Uber and ride sharing obviously have a role. Public transit has a role. Bus is, trying to figure out exactly what distances they should best serve as well. So we are talking about connecting everything, but it's a big problem to solve that relates to so many different things. It's going to continue to take time, but at some point we're going to wake up and realize that all of this is just about solved, and that's what companies like Betterez are chasing right now.
It's very interesting. I mean, it is a huge undertaking, and to your point, because you have both the private sector and the public sector involved, specifically in certain countries where those services are actually provided by the government. So, and it was fascinating. I forgot. Growing up in Europe, I forgot that in some countries having a credit card is kind of frowned upon. People just rather pay cash, right? So, how do you solve travel challenges for those individuals who don't want to have a credit card? I mean, we take that for granted. We all have credit cards in North America, but in some countries, that is not the way, that's not necessarily the first way of making payments. Yeah. So that brings up a big question in my mind around this challenge that we're seeing online, period, but specifically in the travel space, it's continuing to be a challenge around fraud. How can a platform like this help to prevent or circumvent fraud? Because that's a challenge that the industry is facing as well.
Yeah, fraud prevention, leakage is a huge topic, and there's so many different considerations given what you're selling, how you're selling, and the distribution channel that you're selling it through. There are organizations that set themselves up to try to commit fraud and take advantage. And travel is actually one of the areas that a lot of those organizations target because, when you look at how credit card companies treat the operators, everything is heavily weighed towards the consumer. So if at any point there's an issue that hits the operator and you don't really care. So, that's one type of fraud that we see, credit card fraud. There's also fraud that relates to, employees of the company doing things that they should not be doing. But this is where technology has really helped quite a bit. The advent of scanning, barcode scanning. We still have airlines out there that are not scanning, let alone bus companies that are not scanning. The ability to have intelligent barcodes, whether dynamic barcodes or 2D barcodes that have embedded logic with authentication into them, more processes around cash handling, cash management. Those are different processes that you employ. Shift management, so the concept of shifts, deposits. So technology has really helped this industry come a long way from what it used to be, which was a lot of it was honor-based, trip envelopes full of cash and tickets inside. So we're seeing a big change there, and fraud prevention is definitely one of the main things that is driving the change.
Great. Laura, I think you have another question, and then Carlos might have one from the audience, I think.
Oh, I do.
Yes. So my last question. Considering how this travel industry is continuously changing and evolving, first we start with buses, then we went to airplanes, and now with the bus industry is getting more power right here. So what's next for Betterez?
Yeah, I think it's actually continuing to do more of what we've been doing. It's only recently that we've started expanding truly globally. There are many companies globally that are looking to solve the pain that we are solving. So, doubling down on those and continuing to help our customers help their customers. So seamless experiences. We continue to find more and more automation in the platform and open it up as much as possible so that if there are specific things that our partners need to do, they don't always have to depend just on us. So continue to double down. There's lots more out there, and continue to do a good job and execute.
Carlos, I think you had a question there.
Yeah, actually, yes, I do. And Tal, what I would like to ask you is kind of related to the area in which, one of the areas in which I work, which is communications, and also based on our team, one of our themes is communication styles. So in that sense, I would be interested in your platform is international, it's global, and it's cross countries. You even mentioned a few minutes ago Oxxos, for example, right, which is very familiar to us here in Mexico City. So because of this international global nature, what kind of have you ever experienced any kind of let's call it glitches or challenges, for example, in topics like localization of the platform, that kind of thing?
So obviously, no software package ever has any issues with it. Especially not a better. No, in all seriousness, we are creating cash registers. So the only way to protect things at a massive scale is with automation. There are too many things that are being done. So automating, everything from the machine level right through the quality assurance. Is extremely important, and having mechanisms to ensure that things can be checked, double checked, and triple checked, and reported on are very very important. But having said that, you talk about localization, multi-currency, different flows for different products. Those are massive projects that we've had to invest in our platform to ensure that you can get that relatability when you do go across regions. And it's not something that you just kind of say, okay, I finished it. It's something that we continue to spend money and time on. Going forward and continue to improve it. So absolutely has to be done. And the more self-serve capabilities you give, the more unique nature that you can for us to help our customers to create their own experiences, the better it is for everyone. So rather than us dictating something, allowing them to come up with ideas and together maybe even create some of those flows for anything that's consumer facing.
Okay,
Well,
thank you so much, Tal.
Yep, no problem.
I was going to say at Nearsoft, we've been working with travel tech companies for 10 years and have seen everything across the entire ecosystem. It sounds as though you might have a unicorn in the making. So congratulations there. It's a big undertaking. We're up on time. I just want to ask one last question, and if anybody else has another one, we could do that as well. But the last question I wanted to ask was, any words of wisdom you'd like to share related to your journey in building this and other challenges that come with being an entrepreneur building something like this? Any words of wisdom you'd like to share for anybody else who's thinking about disrupting a marketplace too?
Yeah, that's a good point. I actually keep coming back to fundamentals. It's funny how easy it is to forget the fundamentals when you're too busy running a company. So trying to somehow balance growth, profitability, and sustainability is at the end of the day what you're trying to do. I think everything depends on the type of company that you're running. I do believe that the length of the sales cycle actually directly relates to how aggressive your growth strategy and projections should be. So taking that into consideration, and then if you can along the way, try to make a difference. So don't just focus on profit or on growth. Try to figure out a way to make a difference along the way, and find a cause that you want to support. And it might be through your software and what you're doing, but I would recommend focusing on the fundamentals. Deliver that value to your customer, help them understand what that value is, and then find a cause as you're scaling. Focus on that as well.
Great. Well, it's been great to have you. Does anybody else have any other question? Otherwise, we're up on time.
Nope.
Not here in this end, Julio.
Thank you for being with us. And Carlos, do we have a guest next week? I think
yes.
We'll be in Hermosillo next week for our team building week.
Yeah, actually, it's going to be cool because we're going to be having a Dojo Live interview while the team building week is happening. So, and we're going to be broadcasting from our Hermosillo offices, which is the largest.
Time.
Yeah, I look forward to that. That's going to be cool. Great. So we're going to be speaking with, sorry if I mispronounced it, but Geoffrey, I'm sorry about that, Hucker. So he's the CEO of a very interesting company called Work for Impact. So it's going to be about the world of work is changing or disrupting the traditional model of employment to be the first to tap into the unique needs of the growing freelance economy and the for-purpose sector. So that should be interesting. Look forward to that too. That's next week on Dojo Live, same time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next time. Thank you so much, Sal. Take us live.